Alrighty guys, we are back again with another video. This time, so basically Blizzard on the Shadowlands alpha released some legendaries for some classes. Mage, Death Knight, and Warrior were three of the classes that they announced some of the legendaries for and the potential powers for those classes. And I was sitting here and I was pondering the idea of what legendaries would be interesting for Boomkin. So I took to my Discord, you can check that down in the description, and got some ideas and decided that I wanted to make a video, submitted as some feedback, maybe get some more potential ideas as to what legendaries potentially should be added for Boomkin coming into Shadowlands. Let it be known that it's supposed to be 4 generic and 4 spec-specific legendaries, so there is some room for leeway, but there potentially should and could only be 4. With that said, though, I think I've come up with a pretty decent list of a lot of interesting legendaries that would be good for Boomkin coming into Shadowlands and would make balance fairly fun to play. Alrighty. So part of the thing that was interesting to me whenever I was looking at the Mage and the DK and the Warrior legendaries is that some of them were just ripoffs of like old tier sets. Some of them were ripoffs of Legion legendaries. Some of them were ripoffs of Azerite powers, that kind of thing. All very interesting. So then I started taking and looking at old tier sets. I thought about the Legion legendaries. I thought about the Azerite powers, and thought about what would be good. And so, all right, let's get into the video. Basically, this is going to be a discussion topic. I really want you guys to comment down in the description. See what your guys' thoughts are. Give me some feedback. Just give me general ideas of what you think would be an interesting legendary. I want to see if you guys are thinking about it along the same lines as me, and I just want to open up discussion and try to get as much feedback as possible. So, with that said, let's jump into it. So first off, we have the obvious returns. Onus Intuition, I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory as to why it should come back. For those who are the uninitiated, Onus Intuition, basically, whenever you cast Star Surge, you have a 20% chance to make Starfall free. Whenever you cast Starfall, you have a 20% chance to make Star Surge free. It adds variance and interesting parts of our rotation, and it was one of the, by far, the most beloved legendaries in Legion. I think part of the reason was also due to the Stellar Drift being taken on single target, so it gave you an immense amount of mobility, but I think that there was a lot of value in Onus Intuition that has been lost in current BFA Boomkin. So I think if it came back as a legendary in Shadowlands, that would be quite interesting. Next, we have the Impeccable Fel Essence, another Legion legendary, or the Blackrock Foundry 4 set. I think both of these they're basically just variations of cooldown reduction. Impeccable Fel Essence, based on the astral power that you spent, you got cooldown reduction on your Celestial Alignment. Blackrock Foundry 4 set, we can take a look at it right here. Wrath and Starfire casts reduce the cooldown of Celestial Alignment by 3 seconds. So both of these are just different variations of cooldown reduction for your main damaging cooldown in the game. And I think that overall, anything that adds CDR to Boomkin is normally a fairly fun legendary. So I think that some iteration of Impeccable Fel Essence / the Blackrock Foundry 4 set and Honest Intuition would be like fairly obvious returns in terms of what the community wants back at this point. All right, so now we have potentials. Arcanic Pulsar. So I think most people should know what Arcanic Pulsar is, so I'm not really going to show the tooltip for that. But I think it would be interesting to return as a legendary. I don't know exactly how it would be implemented. I think 9 casts would not be ideal for it to return as a legendary, but I think 9 casts of Star Surge rather wouldn't be ideal for it to come back as a legendary, but I think something like this would be kind of cool. Not every legendary has to be a home run, I think, is something that needs to be said, but I think that if you're looking at our Azerite powers, Arcanic Pulsar would be the front runner for me. I would stray away from something like Streaking Stars. I think it gets kind of stale, and I think the longer the hit combo for Moon can last, the more that the class identity becomes that hit combo. And I personally don't want the class identity to become the hit combo. Like I don't really care entirely too much, but I think generally Arcanic Pulse, like Streaking Stars would get old too quickly. I think Arcanic Pulsar would be interesting if they added that back as a legendary. So the next thing I have is something that interacts with Eclipse. I think currently in the game, there's not enough that interacts with Eclipse. I wrote that it feels pretty bland, and if they're not really willing to attack something onto Eclipse itself, having a legendary that makes you perform an action once you enter Eclipse seems like it would be something that's super fun. I've talked about this in previous videos. I think I've talked about this in the most previous Moonkin Monthly. Basically, if you entered Lunar Eclipse, if you got a full moon that came down, whenever you enter the Eclipse, that would be dope. Whenever you enter Solar Eclipse, if something epic happened, that would also be kind of cool. I was also looking at tier sets, and this is not the correct one. Hold on, let me pull this back up. All right. So the 4 set here is whenever Eclipse triggers, your critical strike chance with spells is increased by 15% for 8 seconds. Each critical strike you achieve reduces this bonus by 5%. I don't know if this is necessarily exactly what they should be going for with how the Eclipses function, or like how the Eclipse bonus would be whenever you do enter this Eclipse state. But I do think it would be fairly interesting for something epic to happen once you do enter the Eclipse. And I think that this was just more of like an example. Is basically what I was going for with how that worked out. But that's like an old tier set. It's the tier 11 balanced druid set. So ancient tier. All right. So the next thing I have is Echoing Stars and Lunar Shrapnel. But like good. I think I would typically stray further away from how Lunar Shrapnel ends up working out. I think I would stay more towards the Echoing Stars route. Lunar Shrapnel is exponential AoE, meaning that it can proc off of itself, and it can do exponentially more damage the more targets you have. So generally speaking, I think the Echoing Stars route, where each time Starfalls deals damage, it also damages another nearby enemy for blank amount of astral damage. I think that would be about the level that I went to. If they're really dead set on if they're really dead set on the Moonfire needs to be on the target modifier that Lunar Shrapnel has, honestly, that's probably okay, but I think that something that interacts with Starfall in the way that Echoing Stars and Lunar Shrapnel do would definitely be of great benefit. All right, so next thing we have that I thought I had really good potential was the Orbit Breaker. Basically, for those who don't know, it's a Torghast anima power. It's a Torghast anima power, and basically it reads every 20th Moonfire tick calls down a full moon upon its target, and this is kind of epic, actually. And this is like has this very interesting feeling. So you also get the 40 astral power from the full moon as it hits the target, and every 20th Moonfire tick just calling down a full moon on target. I don't know what it is about it, but something is just so satisfying about that, and I think that would actually make for a very interesting legendary. I think that would actually be something that I would like to play with, and I would definitely be interested in. If they also want to leave it in Torghast, I think I would totally understand, but they did move some of the Torghast anima powers into some classes, so that's why I kind of fielded from the Torghast anima powers as something that I thought would be of use to balance druids in terms of like if they wanted to convert it to a legendary. Obsidian Abora Weave. What was this one? Oh, okay. So this is another one. I thought the 2 set from this was actually quite interesting. I actually thought both the 2 set and the 4 set from this was quite interesting. I thought the 2 set a little bit more so. You have a chance to summon a Burning Treant to assist you in battle for 15 seconds whenever you cast Wrath or Starfire. I thought that would be interesting to have like something that summons like a minion. I don't know if the tree should necessarily taunt anything, but I think something that would create a minion like a Treant would be interesting. In addition to that, the 4 set, while not in an Eclipse state, your Wrath generates 3 additional lunar energy, and your Starfire generates 5 additional solar energy. This is, of course, from the old Eclipse system where you had the Pendulum, I suspect. This is tier 12, so I think it's Kata. So I think this is like a very old Eclipse state. But I think that if you did give power to Moonkin whenever it's outside of Eclipse, that would be... I don't know if I necessarily love that, but it would definitely create interesting gameplay. I worry that it would ever reach a point where you didn't want to enter Eclipse because you would rather just sandbag and sit on the alternative spell and just not enter into Eclipse. But I think that this 4 set could be something that they could work with if needed. All right, and so basically, in addition to that, whenever I was fielding opinions, somebody brought up Emerald Dreamcatcher. I feel like this is not an uncommon opinion. So I personally didn't love Emerald Dreamcatcher, but if it's like super popular, they may want to bring it back just in terms of popularity value alone. I think it could have some value, but with Star Surge cost being reduced to 30, it makes it a bit awkward. The iteration of Emerald Dreamcatcher that a large majority of people talk about was the initial broken iteration of the Emerald Dreamcatcher, where it would reduce your Star Surge Astral Power cost. I think it was by like 8 or 10 or whatever per stack, and you could infinitely be in the Emerald Dream. I don't think it was infinitely, but it was like 85% uptime inside of the Emerald Dreamcatcher buff, reducing the cost of your Star Search by a tremendous amount. And then you started like hitting haste break points, and there was this whole thing for cast sequencing in terms of how you cast your Star Search into that. Generally, I like to stray away from those kind of things because that just has problems with a larger portion of the player base. They start to get separated like if you have legendaries that are very polarizing in that regard, where you have to like pixel perfect cast sequence through your cast, that starts creating a discrepancy between higher and lower end player bases, and I'm not super hot on that. I think that there is room for that in Balanced Druid's kit. I don't know if Emerald Dreamcatcher is that. I think that just natively being a caster, you have a lot of room for improvement just by casting more abilities, and you just have to plant more and you have to cast more. I think you just natively have a better ability to be able to do that. So I think increasing that skill cap even more with Emerald Dreamcatcher is a little bit over here. But again, this is another point, a reason why this is a discussion point. If this is like a super popular thing, make sure you comment it down in the description. I'm going to be reading a bunch of these comments. I really want to read and see what people actually think about all these legendaries. But all right, moving on. So basically this was supposed to be 4 generics and 4 spec specific ones. I couldn't really think of too many spec specific ones. However, one that came to mind, or I couldn't think of too many generic ones, but one that came to mind was the Affinity Stones. It's also a Torghast and Power. And you have all the Affinity passive bonuses, and their effects are increased by 100%. I suspect that they would remove and their effects are increased by 100%, part because like that would start to get wonky with Heart of the Wild. But I think this is a legendary. It would be not interesting for Moonkin, but it would be interesting for Druid as a whole. I think it would be most interesting for something like Restoration. But I just worry that like if you're increasing the damage of something like Balance Affinity and Feral Affinity, then you would run into a problem where like Moonkin is actually playing in Feral. But if you're increasing like the passive bonuses, like now Thick Fur from Guardian Affinity gives you 12% DR instead of 6, that would be dope. But I think that once you start increasing active stuff, even though this reads passive, like once you start increasing active stuff, then it starts becoming problematic. I think that the Affinity Stones is like definitely a good baseline for what they should have for generics. I also think maybe Sufu's Secret could also be an interesting option for generics, but I think that once you start adding generics that are across all 12 classes, then you start to run into different problems. But so I think that making sure that everything is class and or spec specific, and you don't run into like full game generics, I think that is something that they should definitely aim for. Beyond that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Check out my stuff down in the description. Again, leave a comment, like and subscribe to the video if you enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to be creating more content, and stay tuned for whenever they announce Balanced Druid / Druid legendaries on the Shadowlands Alpha, as I will be covering that as well. And I hope to see you guys later. Peace out.